Okay, I think we are about ready to start, inshallah. Okay, yeah, we're ready to start. Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We begin, as always, by praising Allah and by sending peace and blessings and salutations upon the Messenger of Allah and upon his family and his companions. I would like to begin, insha'Allah ta'ala, by introducing myself. I'm not sure how many of the people who are logged into this webinar this evening, at least it's evening where I am here in Dubai. I'm not sure how many of the people know of me, so I would like to start by introducing myself and also introducing my experience as it relates to this particular topic of marriage that we're going to talk about in the webinar tonight, inshallah ta'ala. So first of all, my name is Muhammad Tim Humble, and I was born Timothy Michael Humble. I was born in Newcastle in the UK. I know we have at least one or two people from Newcastle from what I can see from the chat that is going on right now. There's at least one or two people from Newcastle who are watching this. So I was born not far from Newcastle. I moved to Newcastle when I was very young. And at the age of 14 years old, I became Muslim. Obviously, at 14 years old, that was well before the age that I got married. And so I went through that whole experience of looking to get married and the right person to get married to, and eventually getting married, and all of that process, I went through it as a new Muslim. And so I think that's one aspect, myself as a revert, and also as somebody who went through the process of getting married as a new Muslim. And also a couple of other things that are probably relevant to the topic. I'm a marriage counselor. I have been a marriage counselor for certainly the last 4 years, probably more than that, where I meet people and sort of look at marriages that need some support, and that obviously gives you an insight into how sort of what the issues are when people go through, or what the issues are that people go through when they're looking to get married or after they get married. And also I have a number of YouTube lectures on the topic. And because of the time that we have tonight, one of the things that I'm not planning on doing is I'm not going to go over all of the information that I've mentioned in previous YouTube videos. So I have a YouTube video called Looking for Love, in which I discuss general advice to all Muslims who are looking to get married. That YouTube video, you can find it right away. You just need to type in Muhammad Tim Looking for Love, and it'll come right up in YouTube, inshallah. So I have a number of YouTube videos and lectures on the topic. You can try typing in Muhammad Tim marriage and things like that. And eventually there'll be quite a number of videos that I've done on the topic or around the topic in the last sort of probably 5 to 10 years. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit about my perspective coming into this. It's a topic which is very, very dear to my heart. It's a topic which is very important to me. And I think that the reason we're having this webinar is because reverts go through a very unique experience. And yes, some things are shared with people who were born Muslim, and everyone looking to get married to a certain extent goes through those experiences. But there are some experiences that are much, much more common to people who have converted to Islam than they are to people who are born Muslim. And it's not to say that people who are born Muslim don't go through that, they do, but it's to say that it's much often less common or less severe or less of an issue than it might be for many of the people who revert to Islam. So I really want to keep this webinar extremely relevant, and I want to talk about things that are really unique to new Muslims or very common among new Muslims, so that inshallah ta'ala we can give you something above and beyond what you would get in a normal discussion about Muslims and marriage. A couple of things that I want to talk about, or I want to set the scene for, sort of, before we start or before we get into the topic. The first thing that I want to do, the first thing that I want to do is to sort of be focused upon more practical sort of answers to situations rather than theoretical. I don't just want to talk about theory. I will talk a little bit about some of the theory and some of the evidences, but I don't want to be I don't want people to log into this webinar and they really want a practical solution to the problem they're going through. And I just, tell them that, you should get married and marriage is really important and marriage is an important part of your religion, and that's it. No, I want to give you some really practical answers to some of the problems that people face. With regard to Q&A, you have the ability, as part of the software that we're using, the Zoom platform, to ask questions through a dedicated Q&A tab. On my Mac, it's at the bottom of the screen. I think on Windows, it might be at the top of the screen, but you have an ability to ask questions. Now, generally, what I will probably do is I will answer most of them towards the end of the seminar. I'm not looking at your chat window actively. So the reason for that is obviously that if I'm looking at the chat window, I won't be able to talk and look at the chat window at the same time. So instead, what I'm going to do, inshallah, is I am going to just focus on the talk. And then towards the end, I'll scroll through the chat window. But for questions, I'm going to specifically use the Q&A feature because that's easier to monitor who asked questions and what have I answered and things like that. That being said, I would like to begin with some general advice that I give to all new Muslims. And I actually work in a center that's dedicated to new Muslims. I actually work with 2 centers that are dedicated to new Muslims. And these 2 centers in Dubai that are dedicated to new Muslims, whenever I meet with a new Muslim, I always give these 3 or 4 pieces of advice. Let's just call them general tips for success that I believe that every new Muslim needs, regardless of we're talking about marriage or anything else. But if we have a huge number of new Muslims on the webinar tonight, then I definitely want to give across this advice that I would give generally to everybody on this topic. So I basically have 4 things that I think a new Muslim needs to survive. And they're applicable in marriage, they're applicable in your daily life, they're applicable in anything. And really it's a case of experience. It's a case of having looked at so many new Muslims and helped so many people through the early stages of their becoming Muslim, that I just wanted to sort of highlight the 4 things that I think if you do them, you'll be successful, you'll be okay. And if you don't do them, this is where the danger crops up, or this is where people go wrong. So they are only 4 things. And I'm not going to say they're the only 4, but in my mind, they're the 4 most important. The first one is continuously seeking knowledge. When you come into Islam, for most people, you come into Islam a bit like a new baby, a newborn baby. You don't really know a lot about what's going on. You don't really know a lot about what you're supposed to do. You might have got some of the general ideas, some of the principles, some of, few ideas here and there, but you have a lot to learn. And continuous learning means that you don't just learn for the first day or the first week or the first month, but every day you try to learn something new about Islam. Knowledge is one of the greatest weapons that you can have. And one of the things that you can use to be able to, with the help of Allah, get yourself out of any problem that you're in and any difficulty that you face. Having knowledge is like the difference between someone who is alive and someone who is dead. So ultimately, for me, continuously learning, this is one of the things that, like, one of my, call them the vital signs that I look for in a new Muslim. If I see that there is a new Muslim that is continuously learning, and every day they're learning something new, that's the first thing that I believe that that person's gonna be okay. The second thing is acting on your knowledge. Because a lot of us, regardless of whether we were born Muslim or whether we're new Muslim, one of the problems that we have is that our approach towards knowledge is we just want to gather knowledge. We just want to just get loads and loads of knowledge, but we don't ever act upon it. And on the day of judgment, you won't be asked about how much knowledge you had. You'll be asked about how much of your knowledge did you act upon. That is what the hadith says. وَعَنْ عِلْمِهِ مَاذَا عَمِلَ بِهِ. About his knowledge, what did he act upon out of it? That's what you'll be asked about on the day of judgment. So it's not just about gaining knowledge for knowledge's sake, just to say that, oh, I know all about this. But it's about how much of that knowledge you put into practice. The third thing is the prayer. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-ahdu alladhi baynana wa baynahum as-salah, faman tarakaha faqad kafar. The difference between us and the non-Muslims is the prayer. So whoever leaves it has disbelieved. And so it's very important that we stick to our prayers and we take our prayers really, really, really seriously. And the fourth is having good people around you. And this is another vital sign that I look for in a new Muslim. If I see that they're continuously learning, and I see that they are acting on the knowledge, and I see that they're praying, at least their daily prayers, their obligatory prayers, and I see that they have good people around them, I don't worry about that person. I don't worry about that person in any way, shape, or form. Because I know that that person, inshallah, is going to be just fine. So I know that new Muslims go through a lot of issues, a lot of difficulties and problems and so on. And marriage is just one of them. And I hope, inshallah, to be able to do other webinars where we can share even more information about this. But I just wanted to start with those because I think that this is, critical advice for everybody. Continuous knowledge, putting it into practice, doing your prayers, and having good people around you. And I think if you can get those, then inshallah ta'ala, you'll be just fine. Again, before I get into the heart of the topic, I just want to sort of talk a little bit about marriage in the Quran and the Sunnah. And like I said, I do have lectures on this topic, so I'm not going to go over it in too much detail. But also, it wouldn't be right for us to do a webinar on marriage and not speak about the basics of marriage in the Quran and the Sunnah. I just want to talk about a little bit. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of passages from the Quran and a couple of narrations from the Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. So with regard to the Quran, probably the one passage, the one ayah that comes to mind and that just stands out when it comes to marriage is an ayah in Surah Al-Rum, the chapter that deals with the Romans or the Byzantines. And in this chapter, Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَّوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, from the many signs of God, from the many signs of Allah, is that He has created for you, from yourselves, wives or spouses, that you may find tranquility with them and live with them. And He has placed between you love and mercy, or affection and mercy. Indeed, in this there is a sign for people who give thought. So I just wanted to explain a couple of points. First of all, Allah Azza wa Jal tells us that marriage is a sign from the signs of Allah. Marriage is a sign from among the signs of Allah. And it's something that we should praise Allah for and recognize the wisdom of Allah because of it. And this sign is that Allah Azza wa Jal has created men and women, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made one beloved to the other, and Allah Azza wa Jal has made a way that they can live together in such a way that brings them tranquility. And that's what a marriage should really do, right? A marriage should bring you tranquility. You should feel peaceful. You know, when you've had a hard day and you come home and you see your spouse, you should feel tranquility. You should feel at peace. You should feel sakina. You should feel at peace and tranquility. You should feel a state or a sense of tranquility. And Allah has placed between you mawadda. Arabic has a lot of words for love. There's a lot of words for love in Arabic, but the word chosen here is mawadda. And mawadda is, it's more than love. It's love and affection and friendship, all rolled into one. Arabic's a very expressive language. So it's all rolled into one. It's love and affection and friendship. And that's how a marriage should be. It should be built upon love, and it should be built upon affection and care for each other. And it should be built upon friendship. And then Allah said affection or love and mercy. Rahmah, mercy. Love and mercy. And that's because for a marriage to be successful, husband and wife have to be merciful to each other. There has to be forgiveness, and there has to be mercy, and there has to be, letting the issue of certain things, letting certain things go. And then Allah Azza wa Jal told us that in this there is a sign for a people who reflect. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also told us in Surah An-Nisa, which is the chapter relating about the women, and it's the 4th chapter of the Quran, in which Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَأَخَذْنَا مِنْكُمْ مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا. He's talking about an aspect of marriage, and he said that these men have given to their wives a weighty oath. A weighty oath. And that's something very serious. Allah Azza wa Jal didn't describe marriage as something light, as something, it doesn't matter, it's only marriage, right? It's marriage, it doesn't work out, Allah described it as a weighty promise, something heavy, ghalidh. It's not light, it's not easy to just mess around with. You've got to take it seriously. So that kind of tells us the importance of taking marriage seriously and taking the responsibilities and the promises that have been made and the rights of the husband and the rights of the wife seriously. And marriage is a religion that Islam is a religion in which marriage is built upon rights. Islam is a religion in which marriage is built upon rights. It's not just, I have a bit of the, the sort of, I don't know whether to call it the Western or the Eastern concept of love, but definitely not the Islamic one. Let's call it the non-Islamic concept of marriage, or the non-Islamic, because I think we sometimes call it Western, but I think the Eastern sense is just as bad. And it basically, we're talking about this idea of, that the only thing that bonds us is just love. And it's just, I fell in love, and, that's all that matters. And, in reality, Islam is not like that. In Islam, marriage is built upon rights. It's about the fact that a husband has rights and a wife has rights. And no one is allowed to take the rights away from that wife or away from that husband. That's what Islam is about. That's why Islam doesn't allow relationships outside of marriage, because they don't have any protection and they don't have any rights. So we have to take that seriously. Okay, a couple of narrations, just as we're still introducing the topic really, a couple of narrations from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him. In one of them he said, يا معشر الشباب من استطاع منكم الباءة فليتزوج فإنه أغض للبصر وأحصن للفرج ومن لم يستطع فعليه بالصوم فإنه له وجاء أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. The Prophet, peace be upon him, he said, O group of young men, whoever among you is able to get married, let him do so. For this will be better for him to lower his gaze and to protect his chastity. And whoever is not able, then let him fast. For this will be a cutting off of his desires for him. So this was a hadith addressed to a group of young men. And that doesn't mean there are no lessons in it for a group of women, but typically, often it's the young men that tend to be sort of, chomping at the bit, so to speak, to get married. So the Prophet ﷺ, peace be upon him, he addressed them and he said, O group of young men, whoever of you is able to get married, let him do so. And that tells us that marriage is something we should all be considering and giving thought to. If we're not married, it's something we should be thinking about, we should be reflecting upon. O group of young men, whoever of you is able to get married, let him do so. And he gave two reasons. He said, it's gonna lower your gaze and protect your chastity. So it's gonna stop you from looking at the haram and it's gonna stop you doing haram. And then he explained that some people are not gonna be able to have enough money or the circumstances are not right for them to be able to get married. So for those people, there is a temporary alternative. And that temporary alternative is to fast. Because fasting is something which reduces and cuts off people's desire to do something wrong. And that's obviously one of the major sort of protections that you get from getting married. Okay, what about a narration relating to marrying a lady and the kind of qualities that you should look for when marrying a lady? I'm just going to mention a couple of these. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said in an authentic hadith that تُنْكَحُ الْمَرْأَةُ لِأَرْبَعٍ, a woman is married for one of four things: لِمَالِهَا وَلِحَسَبِهَا وَلِجَمَالِهَا وَلِدِينِهَا فَاظْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ تَرِبَتْ يَدَاكَ. He said a woman is married for one of four things. Some people marry a woman because she's rich. She's got money and he thinks he's going to get her money. And I suppose that could be said also for the other way around. Some people marry because of family reputation. She comes from a really good family. The problem is you're not marrying the family. You're marrying the woman, not the family. And some people, they marry because of beauty. She's particularly beautiful. And some people, they marry because of religious compatibility, because of the religious qualities that person has. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, so marry the person because of their religion. May you be successful. So he told us to marry because of religion. And that's when you think about it, religion is the only thing that lasts. Beauty comes and goes. I mean, generally beauty declines with age, declines with, various circumstances, various situations, health issues. Beauty is a very, fickle and not very stable thing. So, maybe it could be said that beauty will always be there as long as the foundation of the marriage is there. That's probably true as well. But at the end of the day, basing a marriage purely on looks is not a good idea. And then you have family reputation. And as we said, family reputation isn't a great idea either, because at the end of the day, you just don't know that the person, just because they come from an amazing family doesn't mean they're going to be an amazing person. And just because they come from a family that is not so amazing doesn't mean that they're not going to be an amazing person. And likewise, marrying for wealth. Wealth comes and goes. You're rich one day. You're rich one day and you're poor the next. You know, you're poor one day and you're rich the next. That is something, which people, everybody can witness and everyone can know about. So what is left? Something which establishes real love. And love can be very fickle as well, like, especially when you see like teenagers dating and they fall in and out of love very, very quickly. They fall in and out of love very quickly. So, like they're in love one day and they're fallen out of love the next. But the love that really lasts is a love that's based on something more serious than just a few emotions, or, you like the way the person looks, but a love that is based upon love of Allah and love of His Messenger. Because if you love Allah and you love His Messenger, peace be upon him, then you automatically love the people who love them. And if you love the people who love them, and you find also on top of that, you find that you have compatibility in other areas, and you like the way each other look, and so on and so forth, then you're just going to strengthen that love and strengthen it, because the basic part of that love, the basic core of that love is loving Allah and loving His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, advising those women and their guardians who are supporting them to get married. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا جَاءَكُمْ مَنْ تَرَضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ فَأَنْكِحُوا. He said, if there comes to you someone and you are pleased with his religion and pleased with his character, then marry that lady to him. And this is from the other side now, not from the side of the man looking for the woman, from the woman looking for the man. She's advised to look for two things. She's advised to look for religion, as the man was advised to look for religion. And she's also advised to look for character. And that's because a man can be very, very religious, but that doesn't mean that he has a good character. It should mean that he has a good character, but practically, you get people who are religious, but they're just not, they're just not nice people. They're just not soft and caring and loving and considerate and all of those things that a man is supposed to be towards his wife. So it's about religion, and it's also about character. And likewise, we have one more narration. The Prophet ﷺ said, تَزَوَّجُوا الْوَدُودِ الْوَلُودِ فَإِنِّي مُكَاثِرٌ بِكُمُ الْأُمَمِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. He said, marry the woman who is loving and will bear you many children. For indeed, I will boast of your numbers on the day of judgment. This also indicates or two of the qualities that a man should look for in a woman that he wants to marry. She should be loving. And it's a very kind of emphatic expression, wadud, someone who is really loving, really caring, someone who's really going to take care of him and really gonna, show him a lot of love and a lot of affection, a lot of care. And also someone who wants to have a lot of children. Because in Islam, one of the purposes of marriage is to have children. And bringing good Muslims into the world who are going to be a positive influence on their society is something praiseworthy and something that we should be aiming and trying to do. So that is just a very, very, very brief and basic introduction to the topic of marriage before we get into the revert stuff. And I wanted to do that for a couple of reasons. I wanted to give everyone a chance to log on who hasn't logged on yet. You know, all those people who maybe were running a little bit late. I'm over here in Dubai right now. I'm just in the Islamic Center. And it's pretty late over here. But there were a few people who maybe were just coming in late. So we've had a little introduction to the topic of marriage. And now we're going to get into the real heart of the conversation and really the practical sort of issues which relate to marriage. So what I've done is I've really divided this lecture probably into two, maybe into three different parts. The first one that I have, or the first thing that I want to talk about for the first part of this lecture is I want to talk about all the stuff that comes before marriage. So all the stuff that comes from looking for a spouse through to the process of getting married, and all of that stuff that is before getting married. And then I want to deal with, in the second part of the lecture, all the stuff that deals with after getting married. So really, when we look at new Muslims and we look at the stage of before getting married, one of the most important, or one of the sort of three, I've kind of come up with three very common scenarios. And through these scenarios, I want to kind of explain some of the best practice when it comes to getting married. So as I said in the promo video, really you get a lot of, you get new Muslims divided into two groups. You get those who can't get married and those who have too much pressure to get married. And then you also get those who became Muslim because of marriage. They became Muslim or they embraced Islam because of the fact that they wanted to get married to a Muslim, and the Muslim said to them, look, I can't marry you until you become Muslim. So we've got these three different sort of scenarios. And within each one, we've got a lot of sub-scenarios as well. And that doesn't mean these are the only problems that new Muslims face, but I have a limited time, so I want to talk about some of the ones that I come across the most common. So let's talk about the ones who struggle to get married. What are some of the reasons why people struggle to get married? Not all of the reasons are external. Not all of it is because of other people. Maybe I can tell you a little bit about myself, just to break up the lecture a little bit and just to give you a little bit of background. When I first became Muslim, by the time I started practicing, I had a lot of Muslim friends, and people were so welcoming and kind and friendly, and they would invite me into their home, and they would they would prepare food. They were just, they were just above and beyond what you would expect in terms of their hospitality and their kindness. And I kind of had the idea that would sort of continue into marriage, like that. So when I said to them, and I would say to a few of the ones I was closest to that, look, I've made a decision. I think it's time for me to get married. And do you know of anyone? And the response was really, it was really quite shocking. It was like, but I mean, inshallah, make dua, brother, just pray. And some of them outrightly said, I had people say in no uncertain terms, they said to me, or they said about me, maybe not when I was there, but they said to other people, what honorable family, what good family would ever give their daughter to an English guy, a white guy, basically. And it was, these were people who were from a different ethnic background to myself. Like, look, who's ever gonna give their daughter to someone like that? And that was the kind of reaction we got back. These are the same people who are like, brother, you're like family to me. You're like a son to me. Whatever you want, we will give you. Please come to our house in the day and the night, anytime you want. Okay, I'm thinking about getting married. No, don't talk to me about marriage. Marriage, you need to find someone else. You need to find someone like you. You need to find someone who's one of your own people, because we can't, it would just be disgrace for us in the community for us to marry our daughters to someone like you. So that was my experience. And I think, some of that might have been down to being in a city that's maybe not the biggest number of Muslims, certainly not the one of the larger ones, maybe a little bit slow to catch on, maybe a little bit backward in some things, possibly. It was a long time ago also. We're talking about, over 15 years ago now, maybe 16 years ago when this sort of thing was happening. So, it's not, maybe things have improved. And what I ended up doing is I had to go to a totally different city. And when I went to that other city, I still found that people were a little bit more open and a little bit more willing to consider, even though it took me quite a long time. It took me quite a long time to get married, and it was quite a difficult process until I found my wife, and then Allah made it very, very easy, and her family were very, very supportive and very kind. But prior to that, it was a pretty difficult and a pretty sort of, I don't think it stressed me incredibly because I wasn't at the stage where it was really, really urgent for me to get married, where I felt that I've got to get married tomorrow. But it was a state where I found it a little bit troubling and a little bit kind of, maybe a little bit like I didn't really belong, when you got that kind of reaction from people. Okay, so let's talk about people who can't get married and some of the reasons why that might happen. Sometimes it's themselves. Sometimes, they've been through a bad experience. Sometimes a bad experience with other, perhaps a Muslim in the past. I've had cases where a Muslim has mistreated their spouse, and then that spouse has felt very reluctant to get married, even after they've decided to practice Islam properly. You have issues of cultural barriers, because as a revert, most of the people you're looking to get married to are not from your same ethnic background and your same culture exactly. They may be from the same city as you, they may be brought up in the same country as you, but generally, as a revert, often you will get cases where they come from different cultural backgrounds. And that means that maybe they're not really, they're a little bit insular and they're not looking to sort of open up to a wider background. Sometimes it's because of the past. Most of us, we didn't become reverts at, 6 years old at the end of the day. We had a situation where we had been adults for a number of years before we embraced Islam. My situation is a bit different because I became Muslim at 14, but generally a lot of people become, someone's becoming Muslim at 25, someone's becoming Muslim at 30, someone's becoming Muslim at 22, at 27. Do we really think that person, is it realistic that person has never been in a relationship or has never sort of had any sort of, past experience like that? In reality, a lot of people, I'm not going to say everybody, but a lot of people will have had some kind of past, it can get in the way. It can be troubling, it can be difficult, and it can cause problems. Sometimes it can cause problems for them in the sense that because of the way they've had relationships in the past, they don't want to get married. And sometimes it causes problems for the spouse because, the spouse brings them and they're like, of course, the spouse says, I've never sort of been in a relationship before, and I've always been practicing Islam from the first day, and how about you? And the person's thinking, well, I became Muslim at 25 years old. I lived my life before that. I lived my life as a teenager. I lived my life as a young adult. I did what people do. So how am I supposed to explain that to somebody? That can be some of the problems. Sometimes the issues of stability within their own family, because marriage is something generally that you rely upon your family to support you and to help you and to really sort of be around you at that time. What do you do when you don't have that family to be around you? And that could be not having a chaperone. That could be not having someone who will even go to the house, because even as a guy, we talk about new Muslim ladies having an issue, but even as a guy, when you go to the house of a lady to ask for her hand in marriage, you're supposed to go with your family. Culturally, people expect you to go with your family. What do you do if your family don't support you? What do you do if your family are not even You know, your family, have even maybe that you have a danger from them. And sometimes the problem comes from the spouse's family, that they're not willing to, you know, that the spouse is happy to marry, you know, that the two people are happy to marry, but the spouse's family, they are not, you know, they're not settled on it. And sometimes the problem is finding someone, the issues of finding somebody and not being able to find the right person. So let me try and give you some solutions, because this webinar is not about me telling you about all of the problems. It's also about telling you about the solutions. Okay. So let's first of all talk about people who are reluctant in themselves to get married. People who find a reluctance within themselves to get married. In my mind, one of the easiest and most important things is, if you find yourself reluctant to get married, take it slowly. Don't feel that you need to get married tomorrow. Take it slowly. Do as much research as you can. Get as much knowledge as you can. Because getting knowledge has two benefits. I mean, first of all, it teaches you the virtues of things, and it teaches you how important things are. And then that makes you dedicated and committed to actually, you know, making a change to yourself in your life. Knowledge can help you get over past experiences, because you learn about the decree of Allah, and you learn about how to bring comfort to yourself when you feel down, and you learn about how to pray and how to supplicate and how to get it answered. And all of those things can help a person who is reluctant to get married. So I would say, for a person who's feeling reluctant in themselves, like that they are their biggest obstacle, I would suggest that two things that are extremely important. Number one, continuously seeking knowledge and really reading up. There are some, I mean, one set of books I would really recommend, and I'm going to ask the admin just to put these on the chat, is the Marriage series by Muhammad Al-Jibali. Muhammad Al-Jibali. And the Marriage series by Muhammad Al-Jibali is a series of 4 books which talk about getting married. There's a one that talks about the rights of the husband and the wife. There's a one that talks about marital intimacy in Islam. And there's a one that talks about children. And they're just the most amazing, amazing set of books. May Allah bless the author and give him complete health and recovery. He's not very well at the moment. He really is, it's just an amazing set of books. So I would recommend everyone, you know, the knowledge that's going to motivate you and that's going to help you. And taking your time. Now, taking your time is a balance. Taking your time is a matter of balance. That what I mean by that is, what often happens is people take so long and so much time that they end up at the end having, you know, they end up at the end marrying someone that isn't the person that they wanted to marry, right? They end up sort of marrying someone who isn't really the person that they wanted to marry in the first place. So it's not about being picky, but it's about taking your time. It's a balance at the end of the day. Islam is a balance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Like this, we have made you a nation that is balanced, not on any extreme. We're not going to rush into something. Neither are we going to go so slowly that we end up passing by good opportunities, and instead we end up in a situation where we are picking somebody that isn't who we want to be with, that wouldn't be who we want to be with. What about issues of cultural barriers and cultural difficulties? I think mostly this tends to be a problem with not so much the person you're looking to get married to, because probably you wouldn't be looking to get married to them if there was a cultural barrier there. But the problem often comes with their family and what you would be expected to do. And this brings to an interesting issue. Does Islam encourage cross-cultural marriage or not? And this is something that you hear different opinions about. You hear some people saying, no, Islam says that it's better for you to marry someone who has a compatible culture with you. And others say, how can you say that? If you said that, how will anyone who is a new Muslim get married? So what is the answer? In my opinion, the answer is somewhere in the middle. And what I mean by that is, I think that if you're going to marry into a family that has a particular culture, you should at least be aware of what that culture normally asks and entails, and at least be a bit comfortable around it. You know, like I think that marrying into a different culture, when you don't know what the expectations are, and you don't know what the situation is, and you don't know what they expect of other people, even if your spouse said to you, I will not ask you to do any of that. Just be aware of culturally what's expected. You know, maybe if you have some friends who are from the same culture, talk to them, spend time with them, you know, because you'll realize that there are culturally specific things among different groups of Muslims, which if you're aware of them, at least you know what you're getting yourself in for. And if you're not aware of them, then really they can cause a problem. At the same time, I think it's ridiculous to say that people shouldn't have cross-cultural marriages. Otherwise, what are we reverts supposed to do? Apart from, like, I have to look around the whole world till I find, you know, like a revert that comes from the same cultural background as me. That's a difficult thing to do. And that's unnecessarily difficult. And our religion doesn't make things difficult for people. But I do believe that you should be aware of the person's culture when you are going to get married to that person, and what that culture would normally expect you to do. Even if the spouse is easygoing and the spouse says, look, I don't care about my culture, I don't know anything about it. But still, you should be aware of what the norms are, so that you know whether you can manage with that, whether you can't manage with that. And I'll give you a simple example. In many cultures, there's nothing to do with Islam. Islam has nothing to do with this. This is a cultural thing. In many, many cultures, it is the case that a wife is expected to live with and serve her husband's family, particularly his mother. This has nothing to do with Islam. Nothing to do with Islam. In fact, it is contrary to what Islam teaches. Because Islam teaches that a lady has the right to her own accommodation, and that serving the mother is the husband's duty, not the wife's duty. Even though she can help him in it, that's great if she can help, but it's his responsibility, not hers. But in many cultures, it's expected that a woman will become basically a maid to her mother-in-law. And you have to, you know, if the guy is like, look, I'm not going to do that, I promise I won't do it. But at the end of the day, if that's what the mother-in-law expects, it's something just to be aware of, right? Just to have an awareness of it. It's not a big deal. You can get over these issues. You can make it clear before you get married and all of those things, that this is not what I'm going to do and so on. That's not a problem. But you got to be aware of these cultural issues. They don't connect to Islam. You're not going to find them by reading Quran or something like that. These are cultural things that relate to particular countries and backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds that people come from. So that's pretty important. Be aware of the different cultures. With regard to not having support from your own family, it's very important that you have support from someone. I don't believe that anybody should be in the process of getting married and be on their own. Not a man and not a woman. It should be that there is a certain degree of support, a close friend, ideally someone a little bit maybe more senior, a little bit somebody with maybe perhaps, you know, a little bit of knowledge if possible, somebody who, you know, is perhaps in a position where they can help. There are a lot of new Muslim centers. There are a lot of mosques who can be helpful. Bear in mind, mosques can be helpful and they can be not helpful depending on how culturally orientated they are. But there are very specific services that can help new Muslims. And I'm sure the admin guys who are on the chat will do their very best to point you in the direction of centers and things like that that can support new Muslims in this. But I think that you should have some support. You should have some people around you who are going to help you and who are going to support you and who are going to kind of be a surrogate family a little bit for you in helping you to get married. I think that's really, really important. Now, I understand there can be somebody who's a new Muslim in a place where they don't have any other contacts. At least you have the internet. At least you can reach out to different people who can just be, you know, a sounding board for you and just, you know, sort of help you through what is a pretty big decision to make in your life. And I guess the last one on the can't get married is the issue of not being able to find someone. I think that there are different ways of finding someone to get married to. And obviously, one of the most traditional ways is to find through the family. So we're going to presume that the revert doesn't have a family who's looking for them. I think there are two things that I would advise people to do, and I think this is pretty sensible advice. I think the first thing is tell as many people as possible that you're looking to get married who can help. Obviously, don't tell people who can't help. Tell as many people as possible who can help, because people know people who know people who know people. And it's helpful if you give them something like a little, sort of little CV. I don't know if that's the right word. Something where you just write a little bit about yourself. Don't put a photo on there or anything like that, but just, your name, your age, what you're looking for. Because otherwise your net is too wide. You're going to get everybody and anybody. You're like, I'm looking to get married. Okay, yeah, I know this guy, he doesn't pray, but yeah, I know someone who's going to get married, but, she's looking to get married, but she doesn't, she doesn't live here, or she's going to get married, but she's 20 years older than you, or 10 years younger than you, or whatever it might be. So it's useful just to put down a few basic ideas. Don't make it too strict. Don't make it too, too much, but a little bit of a few little criteria just to help you to filter down to the right sort of person you're looking for. So a sister says, I'm looking for a guy between the age of this and this, ideally. I'm looking for someone who has, a steady job, looking for someone who hasn't been married before, or maybe you don't mind about that. Like, for example, what is it that you're looking for that are your basic criteria? Obviously, religious criteria, that we said has to come first, and so on. And then the second thing that I would recommend is I highly recommend generally the use of websites and apps that not dating websites or dating apps, but websites that are specifically designed for practicing Muslims to look for spouses. And the way these websites work is you just upload a profile of yourself. I do not, and I'm going to say again 100 times, do not put your photo, because you do not know who's going to be looking at that photo. There's no way to control on a website who's looking at that photo. So my advice is you don't put a photo. But what you do is you put a profile. This is who I am. This is what I like. This is what I'm looking for. And they show you profiles of many other people. Now, one of the things that's useful about that is that when you're talking to your friends, you might have 10 friends and they might know 2 people who are looking to get married. You go on one of these websites and you can see 2,000 people who are looking to get married, 4,000 people who are looking to get married. There's a much bigger pool of people to look for. But I have 2 conditions. Number 1, don't go anywhere near a dating website, even if it's a Muslim dating website. And yes, there are Muslim dating websites, and may Allah keep us safe. But keep away from anything that is like dating, anything that is like, chat, meet to the guy, let's meet tomorrow, where can I see you, or let me take you out for a meal. None of that stuff. We're just talking about somewhere you can upload a profile and you can see the profile of people who match your criteria. And the admin has mentioned that there is a particular website. Now, me personally, I'm not going to endorse a specific website because I don't have experience with them in that way. But there is a website that the admin is recommending, and they have an offer as well for you. So please do have a look at that. I believe it will be mentioned in the chat, insha'Allah ta'ala. At the end of the day, that's one of the good websites that I recommend. Talking about another one that I do recommend, that I have some experience with, is also is a website called Sunnah Marriage UK. Maybe the admin can find the link for that. I'm not sure if it's active right now, but I do know the brother involved in that. He's a very, very, very conscientious brother who's really trying his very best to help people to find the right people to get married to. So these are some examples anyways, and you guys can, I'm sure you can find more, but don't go for the ones that have, you put your photo on there, you video chat, you Skype different people, because, at the end of the day, you're not like a product on a shelf in a supermarket. It's not like everybody look at me, it's finding the right person. And this brings me on to, probably an important topic. which is a lot of people feel very uncomfortable with the idea of the way Muslims get married in the first place. You know, like, how do you get married to someone you don't even know? And I think that getting married to someone you don't know, that's probably a little bit of it's not exactly how things are. But in Islam, what you're looking for is, you're looking for religion, you're looking for compatibility, you're looking for character, and you're looking to make sure that you have enough information to get married to that person. And then you're looking to build the relationship from the day that you get married. As is it's often the opposite, certainly in the culture I come from. The situation would normally be that you would meet someone, probably live together for, 5-6 years. Then when you have a commitment to each other, get married. But in Islam, it's a little different. So it can be a little difficult to get used to that concept and that idea. That a person sort of, has to get used to the idea that I'm going to be getting married to somebody that, I don't know that well. At the same time, you're not getting married to someone anonymous. It's not blind, like a blind date where you just, sort of like randomly turn up and meet somebody. At the end of the day, it's about researching them in a way that makes sense. And not just, by, I like the look of her, now I've lived with her for 2 years, let me marry her. It's more like, this is a person who fits my religious criteria, who wants what I want, who we have compatible personalities. That doesn't mean we have the same personality, but we have compatible personalities. We love the same things, we want the same things. And, we have that love of Allah, the love of His Messenger. We're physically attracted to each other, and we're happy that we understand what each other want, what we want from each other. And that is the idea, that's the concept. And it's about growing the love from the day you get married, not necessarily having this engagement period and things like that. And I'll come to talk about that in a little bit more. So the next issue that I'm going to deal with is those people who are under too much pressure to get married. So this particularly happens with sisters, but it happens with brothers as well. But especially it happens with sisters, that the day the sister becomes Muslim, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. I bear witness that there is no God except Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. What happens? Sister, I have an excellent brother for you to get married to. He's really willing to marry you today, this evening. And this is really, in my mind, I do not advise this at all. I think that you don't have the right knowledge to know who is right for you at that stage, to judge someone's religious commitment and who is and who isn't. It opens up exploitation, because at the end of the day, they know that you don't have the family support and the people behind you to be able to really help you and really support you in what you need. And it opens the door for people who maybe I'm being a little bit unfair, but people who really wanted to meet a woman like you anywhere, out in the street somewhere, but they happen to find one who had become Muslim, and well, that must be better. It's not a foundation for a lasting marriage, and it's something which can create a lot of difficulties for people. So I'm not going to say turn down a really good opportunity, but in your first days of Islam, spend your time to get used to the religion, get near to Allah, focus on praying, focus on, learning the basics. And then when you're ready to get married, get married. It's not a case that you feel pressure. And it's not just the sisters. It happens also to the brothers as well. And it can be difficult, because you can feel flattered in a way, that you've become Muslim and straight away somebody wants to marry you, and, you feel a bit flattered about it. You're like, wow, I never got this before I was Muslim, what is this? First day and everyone wants to marry me. This is brilliant. But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean those people are right for you. We've got to examine the religious commitment. We've got to examine the compatibility. We've got to examine the character. And it's not just about knowledge. I was just looking at the chats just flicking up, and people say about marrying someone of knowledge. But I want to emphasize, it's not just knowledge. It's also character. Because you can say, I want to marry a person of knowledge, but at the end of the day, people of knowledge sometimes don't have, the right kind of character. there's a lot of issues, you know, like people get into difficult situations and relationships and sometimes second marriages and all sorts of things that are going on. And really the question is, do they really know what they are looking for in a spouse? And are they really ready to get married? So my thing would be to say, you know, maybe don't turn it down. If you think it's a good marriage, say, look, you know, I'm happy to consider it, but at the moment I need to focus on my Islam. And when I feel more confident and I feel stronger in my faith, then inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to move forward. Now, I also want to talk about, even though it's not a nice topic, but I want to talk about this as well, is a topic of exploitation. Sadly, there are people, and I'm really sad to say this, but there are people who look out for people in this situation, reverts, and they prey on them. And they try to exploit them. And they try to get them into marriages that are not good for them, or sometimes not even proper marriages at all. You know, they're actually not even Islamic marriages at all. And they often, you know, twist the texts and really, you know, it's really, really sad. But it does happen. And so I would advise everyone, brothers and sisters, be on your guard. Have advisors around you. Have people who are maybe a little bit older, a little bit wiser than you. Have them check out what it is that you've decided to do and listen to their advice. Because often it's the case that the person you want to marry, you've got to be very careful, because there are people who exploit it. Some of them are more guilty than others because some of them exploit it deliberately and they know what they're doing. And some of them exploit it kind of out of their own ignorance, you know, like they also, if you ask them, they probably know that it's not a good idea for them to get married, but they're kind of like, yeah, it'll work out in the end, I'm sure, and I really want to marry them, and so on and so forth. My advice on those people who feel too much pressure to get married is two things. Number one, slow it down and focus on your Islam. And number two, have an advisor or have somebody who is around you who can kind of filter out those people. And this is one of the problems we have, because a lot of the people who advise you are like, they also get flattered when you get flattered. You know, when you get someone telling you about marriage and they want to marry you, and the advisor is like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Someone wants to marry you on the first day, and I wish this had happened to me. And you know, you need somebody who's got their wits about them. You need somebody who's street smart. You need somebody who is really, you know, gonna put their foot down and say, you need to just go back. You know, like, I think it's very important. And this is where it probably is a good time to talk about the issue of the wali. Now, I'm going to say, even for brothers, I think you should have an advisor. And I think it should be somebody ideally who is senior, who is respected, somebody who has experience in it, and somebody who's willing to do the job, you know, as an advisor. Now, sisters, of course, you can't get married in Islam without having a guardian. A guardian. And that guardian in Arabic is known as the wali. The wali. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions around the wali and a lot of confusion around the wali. One of the misconceptions and the confusion around the wali is that you can choose whichever wali you want. Oh, he's my wali today and he's my wali tomorrow. In fact, the wali has already been chosen for you. So I'm not going to call it a wali because it's going to confuse you. I'm going to say the guardian, the one who is giving you away in marriage, has to be the judge or the person in the position of a judge. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ said in an authentic hadith, أَنَا وَلِيُّ مَنْ لَا وَلِيَّ لَهُ. I am the guardian of the woman who has no guardian. And he at that time was the ruler and the chief judge, of course, of the Muslims. And therefore we say that he or whoever he appointed in his succession and whoever comes after in terms of, you know, somebody in authority, that is the wali. And there's a reason for that. Because if we take away the wali system, we open the door to all kinds of exploitation. The wali system is not about a guy telling you who to get married to and who not to get married to. It's not about restricting you or causing you problems or making things difficult. It's about restricting people who would otherwise exploit you and making them realize that you're not defenseless. You have somebody who is not going to allow this marriage to take place until they've made sure that this person has been given the proper consideration. The problem we have is that in most cases, the wali doesn't want to do the job. So if you're in an Islamic country that has a judiciary system and a court, the wali is the judge who does the marriage. If you don't live in an Islamic country and you don't have a judge who does the marriage, then I would suggest that probably the imam of a masjid or the community leader, someone who's like an Islamic leader of their community, and someone who typically marries people to each other and is typically officiates a marriage ceremony, this is the type of person who would be the wali. Now they are allowed to appoint someone else. So the wali, when you go to them, let's just say, for example, the wali is the imam of the masjid. And you go to them and he says, look, I can't do the job. You say, okay, can you appoint someone to do the job? You say, okay, I appoint this person to do the job. That's fine. But what we shouldn't have is a wali who wants to marry the girl in the first place. That doesn't make any sense. The wali is supposed to be like a father figure, like someone who's going to check the guy out, going to give him a hard time, like in the sort of traditional way that people used to get married. But what do you do if the wali spends more time looking at the girl than anybody else? At the end of the day, the wali doesn't mean that you can be alone with them, doesn't mean that you don't have to cover in front of them. The wali is a stranger to you. But at the end of the day, the wali is supposed to act like a father figure. And it has to be a Muslim, so obviously it can't be a non-Muslim father or something like that. That doesn't mean you can't consult your non-Muslim father, you can. But the final decision rests with the judge, or the one who is in the position of a judge, like the imam or the head of the Islamic center or whatever it is that you have in your local area. Now, a lot of sisters are going to say, that's not practical. And I agree with you, it's not practical. Because the wali is a big problem. The biggest problem I ever see with the wali is the wali just doesn't care. So the wali is like, yeah, I'll be your wali, no problem. You bring me whichever guy you like, I'll sign the paper. That's not a wali. That's not what your father would do. Your own father wouldn't do that. Your own father would, let me meet him, let me see how he is, let me ask him a few questions, let me make sure he's going to treat you right. And yet you have a wali who is like, yeah, bring me anyone you find, don't matter, as long as his name's Abdullah or something similar, just let me sign off on it. And that's the state of many of the people who act as a wali. Now, sometimes you can't change because there's just nobody else. This is the imam of the masjid and there's no other. You could go to a different masjid, but often you end up in a situation where that's what you have. And if that's what you have, I would suggest, if your wali is not active, that you look at another option. Now, you can't replace the wali has to be there. But what you can do is bring on board someone who might not be in the position of the wali, the guardian, but someone who can still look out for your interests. And I like to use the word wakil, a representative. A wakil is a representative. Now, this person doesn't have any official authority. They can't tell you you're not going to marry him. They can't say to you that, I don't think you should. This is someone you choose who you think would be a good person just to watch your back and look out for you. They don't have to be an imam. Ideally, they shouldn't be someone there is a fitna, like there is an attraction between you and them, or there is, someone of similar age. It should ideally be somebody, again, somebody a little bit older or whatever, but somebody who's a representative for you. Now, it's unofficial. You can change and chop and choose as many as you like, and there's no regulation about it. It's just about having someone act on your behalf. So there's a lot of things that you can't do on your own, like go meet the guy on his own. You don't know what the guy might do. You don't know what the guy's going to be like. But you can send your representative to meet him. The representative might give more care than the imam gives, might give more care than the judge gives. And it's, at the end of the day, it's not binding on you. If the representative says to you, I don't think he's a good guy, you don't have to listen. But it's just about having some extra pair of hands to help you out. So I believe that it's very, very important that aside from having a wali, if your wali is doing his job and he really is acting like a father, then excellent. If your wali is not acting like a father and he's not doing his job, then I suggest that you find yourself a representative who is not going to do the job of the wali, still going to go to the wali at the end, but a person who's just going to look out for you. And they're easier to find because it doesn't have to be an imam, it doesn't have to be a judge, it doesn't have to be a scholar. It could just be somebody who, you know, is going to look out for you. And that person it doesn't have to be a binding agreement that whoever he agrees with. It's just about finding somebody who's going to look out for you, going to go meet people for you, going to go check people out for you. You know, it's something that I found to be extremely, extremely beneficial, is to have this idea of having a wakil or a representative. And you say, you know, like, brother, I found a brother for marriage. This is who the brother is. Would you mind meeting with him and telling me your opinion? Yeah, sure. Because, you know, you're not asking me that I have to do the nikah, that I have to do the marriage, that I have to be this big judge or something. You're just asking me to go check the guy out and give you my opinion. But it's worth doing. It's worth doing. And the similar idea, not quite the same, could even work with the opposite gender as well, with regard to men looking for women, is if you have a female who is a female relative, or maybe someone older from the community, like an auntie or something, who, you know, you feel more comfortable dealing with, you could say, can you go and meet that lady for me and tell me more about her? Because I feel me meeting her on my own, I'm going to be a bit uncomfortable. But maybe if you go and meet her, you know, you tell me what she's really like. There's nothing wrong with that, and it can be very, very helpful indeed. Okay, on the last one on this first set of scenarios is those who became Muslim because of marriage. Those people who became Muslim because of marriage. This is a difficult one, and it has a number of different scenarios in it. What's really, really important if you become Muslim because of marriage, the most important thing is that you give Islam time for you to be able to learn and be able to grow as a Muslim. Because you being a Muslim is more important than you being married to a Muslim. And I know that maybe when you first, you know, decided to get married because of, and you decided you're going to convert, and you said, well, you know, religion doesn't matter that much to me, and I converted, Islam is the same as Christianity anyway, or it's similar enough. And, you know, that kind of idea, you know, it can be very difficult to really get your feet firmly planted as a Muslim. So I think the answer to that is learning. You know, give some time to learn Islam. Even if you become Muslim just because of marriage, give some time to learn Islam. You know, it's not that you don't have to reconvert or something like that. It's just a case that you know, Islam is only accepted from you when it's sincere. It's got to be for God. It can't be for anybody else. It's got to be for Allah. So if that's the case, then, you know, it's about learning enough of Islam to make it settle in your heart, and then making that decision that, yes, I am going to get married, but at the same time, I'm going to become Muslim for me. And so we always encourage people who come to our center and say, my husband's my fiance is a Muslim. I want to become a Muslim so I can get married to him. We always say to that person, come to 1 or 2 classes. Just listen a bit about Islam so that something can settle in your heart more than just, you know, the fact that your spouse is a Muslim. On the other side, there are other problems. When that happens and that person gets Islam settled in their heart, you get all kinds of problems. One of the problems is that convert suddenly starts to think that their spouse might not be a good person for them, because they fell in love with their spouse when they were not committed to Islam, and the spouse was not committed to Islam. And then what happens? Suddenly they've learned about Islam and they've gained commitment. And you know what happens with reverts when we get commitment in Islam, we get commitment in Islam, usually. Like when somebody really wants to become a Muslim and they really dedicate their lives to it. And then the spouse, look, I didn't marry you for this. You know, I mean, I've had, for example, a new Muslim lady who will say that I decided to put on the hijab, and her biggest obstacle is her husband, that she became Muslim because of him. And he says, well, I didn't marry you for you to put on a hijab. Why are you covering yourself for? I married you and you were wearing whatever you wanted, you know, like your inappropriate clothing and whatever you were wearing. Well, that's what I wanted from you. I didn't want you to be covered up and wearing hijab. And why are you praying now? Do you think you're more religious than me? These problems happen also. One of the ways to stop that, there's probably two pieces of advice that I would give. The first thing is learn along with your spouse. You know, if you became Muslim for the sake of marriage, you go and learn and let them go and learn with you. Because if you're learning and you go off on a new tangent and they are not learning anything and they stay exactly where they are, this is going to be a reason for problems. And the other thing is, don't feel you need to apologize for your religion. You know, at the end of the day, born Muslims might say things like that, like, I didn't marry you for this or whatever. But just be firm with yourself and say, at the end of the day, I became a Muslim and I've decided to practice Islam, and you are going to have to support me in doing so. And if necessary, that may be a case where you need to get some outside help, some counseling and support to help the Muslim, the born Muslim, cope with the fact that the one that wasn't born Muslim has started practicing Islam more than they have. That does happen. That does happen a lot. So I now want to talk about the process of getting married. Some of the tips about the process of getting married. So it's really clear, or it should be really clear to everybody. And again, my lecture, the Looking for Love lecture, might have more information in this, but the process of getting married, what's really important is that we understand that there is no relationship in any way which is prior to the marriage contract. So even if you've agreed to get married, even if you have, you know, sort of seen each other and you're happy with each other, nothing has changed. In Islam, nothing has changed. You didn't become fiance, you didn't become like, you know, engaged or something like that. You might have a promise to marry at some time in the future, but nothing has changed until that marriage contract takes place. So you can't start dating, you can't start like spending time together, you can't start being alone together. All of the things that you wouldn't do for other people, likewise, you shouldn't do because you have a promise to someone that you're going to marry them. Rather, that promise, yeah, it's something you're going to fulfill in the future, but until that marriage contract is done, then nothing has changed. So how do you deal and how do you interact? It's really important that there's no being alone together. You know, like that if you meet with other people with you, preferably one person from the guy's side and at least one person from the girl's side, you know, so that there is not that, and it's a formal meeting, it's not a chat, you know, it's not like a dinner date or something, you know, like it's a formal discussion and a meeting. You are allowed to look at that person and you're allowed to, you know, to look and decide whether you're attracted to that person for as long as you need to look. But it's also about asking the right questions. And again, in the lecture, Looking for Love, there's a lot more detail on that. But I do think it's really, really important to ask questions. So we said there should be questions about religion, questions about character, questions about compatibility. So questions about religion, character, and compatibility. If we talk about questions about religion, you know, it's not really enough to just say, are you religious? Because someone's going to say, yeah, I'm religious. But you really want to sort of ask questions that kind of, open-ended questions that kind of get you thinking about the person's religious commitment. I'm just going to give you an example of one because I've given others in other lectures and I don't want to take too much of your time. But I give an example of one question that I think is an amazing question. What kind of lectures do you like to listen to, or books do you like, Islamic books do you like to read? So from this, you're going to get to know about what the kind of people they listen to. You know, are they just, you know, I just read Quran. Or, yeah, I listen to this person and this person and this person. It's going to give you an insight to the type of person that they are and the type of religious commitment they have. And then ask them some questions like, for example, how often, you know, for a guy, how often do you go and pray in the masjid? What kind of Islamic activities do you do during the week? You know, do you go to classes? Do you study? Who do you study from? You know, those kind of questions. And I'm not saying they're the only things, but they're good questions to gauge a person's religious commitment. And of course, your the people who are backing you up and supporting you, your wali or your advisor or your friends or whatever, are going to check out the reality of that and make sure that it really is the case. In terms of character, it's a difficult one, to ask questions about a person's character. Because if you say to someone, do you get angry? Even the most angry person in the world says, no, alhamdulillah, I don't get angry. And I'm really nice to everybody. That's natural. People kind of try to put across the best impression of themselves that they can. But in terms of character, it is important to ask. It's important to ask, I don't know, maybe something like, how do you get on with your siblings? What's your relationship like with your parents? If your friends can describe you with 3 words, what 3 words would they describe? Are you competitive? I don't know, but the point is questions that really bring out the person's character. And of course, as you're talking to them, you will get a degree of their character as well. You could ask them scenarios like, what would happen if I didn't agree with you on something, if I thought you were wrong about something? If you get the answer that I'm never wrong about anything, then the kind of person the person is. Or if you get the answer that, I don't tolerate people to differ with me. I don't tolerate people when they, I don't tolerate a spouse who doesn't agree with me, or something like that. It's important to ask about those things. And it's also important to ask about compatibility. So that could be like, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? What kind of a family do you want to have? Where do you want to live? What do you think about, living alone, living with family, whatever it is? Ask questions about compatibility. If you want to work and you think they don't expect you to work, then ask about it. If I want to work, you have any objection to that? Like anything that you think might be an objection or an issue or a cultural issue, ask about it. You don't have to ask it all in the first sitting, but ideally you're looking to, find out as much about the person. And my preference is find out as much about the person before you meet them. Email or whatever it is, ideally not one-to-one, share it with the other people who are involved. So it's not like a private chat or something. But, try and find out more about the person before you meet them, because you don't even want to be meeting someone who you're fundamentally not compatible with, right? You want to be meeting somebody who has the right kind of compatibility. So I would ask questions about religion, questions about character, questions about compatibility, and also have your friends and the people supporting you try to find out as much about that as possible. I also recommend that obviously before you make a decision, you do 2 things. Number 1, you consult other people, because Allah Azza wa Jal commanded the Prophet ﷺ, and he commanded all of us, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ, and consult people about important matters. So you consult people. That means you go, you don't make your decision right there and then. You go and you consult. And the second is that you pray what we call the istikhara prayer. The istikhara prayer. And if I can ask the admin brother to just post the link for the how to pray the istikhara prayer. I think it's 2217 on Islam QA. Could you just pull that out, how to pray the istikhara prayer from Islam QA, and you put it in the chat for everyone? It's basically a special prayer of guidance where you pray 2 units of prayer and you ask Allah to guide you to what is best and to help you to make the right decision. Now that doesn't mean you're going to get like a dream that, oh, I've seen this person. It just means that if it's good for you, Allah is going to make it happen. And if not, Allah is going to give you something better. And it's always about that. It's Islamic insurance. Istikhara, or seeking advice prayer, the prayer for seeking advice. This prayer is like Islamic insurance. You're asking Allah that if anything goes wrong, keep me away from it. And if it's good for me, make it happen. So inshallah, the link will be there with a bit more information on that topic. I think it's really important, 2 more things about the process of getting married before we go on to the topic of people who are already in a marriage and the issues that they might be going through. The issue of 2 more things. The first is, I recommend that once you've made a firm decision to get married, and you've consulted and you've prayed your istikhara and you've found out everything you want to find out, you've asked your questions, I seriously recommend that you don't delay the contract of marriage. You can delay living together, you can delay, like having a party or a wedding ceremony, but don't delay the contract of marriage. Because once that contract is done, you are husband and wife. And you can be alone with them, chat to them, go out for dinner with them, and all of the other things that husband and wife would do. So that gives you a bit of flexibility, even if you don't want to live together. In fact, it almost offers a solution to the problem of the people who feel uncomfortable about the way you get married in Islam, and they're kind of used to the idea of dating and then getting married. At least when you have the contract, maybe you're not going to be intimate, maybe you're not going to live together, but at least you have that contract, and at least you can freely talk and meet. And especially for a revert who might not have family to support and things like that, it means that you already have that family in terms of marriage, and you already have that support with you. And then after that, you can take your time in terms of living arrangements and things like that. I would also recommend that you are not frightened to say no. A lot of people think as soon as they have a meeting with someone, they have to say yes. That's not the case. I think that before you even have a meeting with someone, you should tell them, I'm not going to tell you my decision in this meeting. I'm not going to tell you my decision in this meeting. I'm going to go home, I'm going to seek some advice, I'm going to pray istikhara, etc. And then I am going to come and I will give you my answer. Because it relieves the pressure from you. There's so much pressure on you to give an answer, subhanAllah. Like, you feel like pressure, and you might be like, well, they seem okay, and even though they said this, but I'm sure I can manage. It's much better that you take your time. You say, look, it's been a good meeting. May Allah reward you. I'm very happy with our discussion, but I'm going to take my time. It's an important decision. I want to make sure I make the right one. So I'm going to go away, I'm going to pray, I'm going to take my time, and I will let you know. And it gives you the comfort to be able to say no. Don't be frightened to say no. Okay, so we've dealt with some of the issues before marriage. I know it's a long topic, and I'm trying to cover as much as I can. And we now want to come on to the issue of people who are already in a marriage. They're already in a marriage. Some of the issues that people go through. First of all, generally on the issue of marital discord, marriage problems, I have another set of video. I have a video called, now that's a good question. What is it called? It's on the Kalima YouTube, and it's called Marital Discord maybe, or Solving Marital Problems. Something like that. In any case, I have a video on that topic as well. And that video is basically through my experience of being a marriage counselor. I went through all of the ways to solve problems in a marriage that I know of. And I think we came up with over 20 individual points of benefit in terms of that. So please do refer to that for more information. But I want again to focus on some of the things that are specific to the issue of reverts. So one of them we've already covered, which is the issue of going ahead of your spouse, that becoming more religious than your spouse. So this is the case where there's a revert who is becoming more religious than their spouse, and their spouse feels uncomfortable with it. And we said that the best solution is simply to learn together. Make it a part of the marriage that you learn together from the beginning. Because if you start learning with that journey, then the danger is that there is a real danger that the other person gets left behind. It can be the other way around. The spouse is suddenly getting a bit more religious. And, some Muslims find religion a little bit later on in their life, a little bit more commitment later on in their life. And, the new Muslim is like, look, I didn't, like when I married you, you didn't look like this, you didn't behave like this, you didn't pray like this. And now you're a totally different person. So this is also requires a bit of understanding. And I would again suggest that any revert who feels kind of overwhelmed by their spouse practicing Islam, I would suggest two things. Number one, your best weapon is knowledge. Because if you learn what Islam requires of you, you'll know if what they're doing is right or if what they're doing is wrong. You'll know about that. Also, I strongly recommend that you differentiate between Islam and culture, because a lot of people don't do that. The spouse may say, I'm becoming more religious, but actually may be becoming more cultural. And it may be nothing to do with religion. And again, that comes back to the same point of knowledge, because a lot of Muslims who are born Muslim are not able to distinguish between their culture and their religion. Like for them, they know their religion is Islam, but they don't know what parts of it are from, for example, there are, cultures in which Muslims are that, for example, there is mistreatment of women, for example. That's nothing to do with Islam. Islam absolutely has absolutely no concept of mistreating a lady. But there are certain Muslim cultures in which this is common. So a person may say, may start mistreating his wife, and then may say, well, I'm becoming more religious. But they've become confused between their religion, and they've become confused between their culture. They become confused between their religion and between their culture. So knowledge will help you to be able to combat this. And if it becomes too much for you, either you feel your spouse is too far ahead or you feel yourself too far ahead, then definitely go through the stages of getting support, getting someone to help you. Maybe the person who helped you to get married, or maybe somebody else, or somebody who understands and can be gentle and can keep the issue private. But don't expose it to everybody and don't talk about it to everyone. That's one of my key tips. Okay. My next issue of people already in marriage is, not having family to lean on. Traditionally, if you have, family support, what you would do if you have a bad time, you can at least call your family. You at least have your family to support you. And I still believe you need a support network. If your family are not supportive, that's one thing, but you need a support network. Now, I'd love to tell you that you can go to your local imam and they'll definitely help. But the reality is that not all of the local imams are knowledgeable about the problems reverts go through. I think it might be more sensible to go to a specialist group of people who deal with reverts. We talked about, Islam-Wise and other groups that are out there that specifically support reverts and are good at it. They may be able to give you some real help. When you feel like you need someone to lean on, someone to talk to, at the end of the day, often these issues are rescuable. You can rescue yourself out of them. But the issue is that you just need someone independent. And I personally prefer it not to be family anyway. Even when you have supportive family, I personally prefer that you don't involve your family. Because I think when you involve your family, you automatically make the issue bigger than it has to be. And then everyone gets involved and people start saying, see, I knew you were no good and I told you shouldn't have married them and all of these things. But by all means, that's what I think is worthwhile. Get a specialist involved, a marriage counselor, or somebody who has experience dealing with new Muslims. One of the ones that I really wanted to talk about for those already in marriage, before I go to the questions, is not fulfilling expectations. This has happened so many times that I've seen in my marriage counseling. And I'll just give an example. A lady became Muslim and very quickly got married to probably too quickly, got married to someone who was born Muslim. And he comes a few months later and they're having big fights. And he says, she's not a good wife. She's not how a good ... like a good Arab lady would be. I don't want to say the specific country that he mentioned. But he's like, she's not like a good Arab wife would be. And so it's a problem that the spouse is not matching the expectations of that born Muslim. She doesn't cook for me. She doesn't do this for me. She doesn't listen to me. She doesn't, like whatever. And the point is that here that really that person, when they got married, they wanted to marry the revert maybe for how they look or for who they are or their personality or whatever, but they wanted them to morph into, what their mother was like for their father. They wanted them to morph into that and giving unrealistic expectations. And when this happens, I have a real goal, I have a real goal at the person, and I had a real goal at this individual. I said, look, at the end of the day, where did you get married to your wife? How did you get married to your wife? And he mentioned that he met her in not a very nice place, not a very halal place. And it wasn't a very halal introduction. And I said, and now you're complaining she's not a good Arab wife? You're complaining that she doesn't treat like how your mom treated your father? Well, that's not right at the end of the day. But I tell you what will help. Both of those two need to go and learn the rights of the husband and the rights of the wife. Because the rights in Islam are non-cultural. These rights are not Arab rights or Asian rights or English rights or anything else. They are Islamic rights. If she's falling short in her Islamic duties, then we're going to help her to grow and to do that. If he's falling short in his Islamic duties, we're going to help her to grow and to do that. But as for this, she doesn't do what my mom did for my dad, then that's not a valid excuse. But what is a valid way of measuring it is measuring it by Islamic rights. Because ultimately, all of us have to leave a part of our culture behind. You don't have to leave all of your culture behind, but you have to leave the parts that contradict Islam. And Islam clearly defines what a woman should do for her husband and what a husband should do for his wife. Very clearly defines. So like we said, that book series we mentioned earlier, where you can just go through and learn the rights of the husband and the rights of the wife without any cultural bias. And then that will help people to understand that you don't have the right to demand something which is cultural, but you do have the right to help each other to fulfill the responsibilities that are Islamic. So I've covered a number of different scenarios. I've tried to give some answers. I think, time-wise, I've taken a big chunk of your time. And I think what's more sensible now is we go to Q&A. Now, I'm not going to say that I've covered the topic in any detail, but I think if you watch this webinar, and I'm recording it on my side, and I think the brother's also recording on his, if you watch this webinar, inshallah, and you watch the video Looking for Love, and you watch the video on marital discord and disagreement, I think, that would cover most of the issues that people have when it comes to looking for a spouse or those who are already married. Now, let me go to the Q&A. So I know I've been seeing some Q&A coming on the chat. So what I'm going to say is, I'm going to say that with regard to the admin, if there's anything in the chat that should be a Q&A, could you please post it for me as part of the Q&A, please? That's for the admin, for the brother who is doing the admin. If you could post it as part of the Q&A. So let me have a look at this question. Now, please forgive me if my answers are a little bit brief. If they need more of an answer, I think getting in touch with Islam-Wise would be a good idea, because obviously we don't want to take too much longer of your time, but I will do my best to really try and give you the best advice that I can. So the first one, accepted Islam in 2011 and involved in marital issues with fellow converts as well as Muslims. I have the following questions. Many Muslims use converts as a trap for their less practicing daughter. The situation becomes complex when they first marry off their daughter to some rich and handsome guy only to end up in divorce. Then they start considering a convert as it's known that they might be more sincere, and they may ask the convert to stay at the girl's house only. Yeah, this is a very valid example of what I talked about being aware of what's going on. Because it can sometimes, be a little bit too good to be true, in the sense, oh yeah, my daughter, and I would love to marry you to her. And you're thinking, okay, what's the catch? So it's really important that you have two things here. It's really important that you have good support to give you advice. And it's really important you ask the right questions. Have you been married before? And I don't have anything against people who've been married before and hasn't worked out. I mean, that's not an issue. But you have to make sure that there's a real reason and a real understanding as to why it hasn't worked out, and that the issue is not going to be sort of lost or repeated again. Okay. What is the best way to find a spouse for a revert, and how can a female get married if she doesn't have any Muslim family? I think I've answered that in the webinar. We mentioned a couple of things. We mentioned that try to tell other Muslims about the fact that you're looking to get married. Put together a little CV, a little biography of yourself, and some of the online services, and there is a link to some in the chat as well. And again, I've spoken to this about this in more detail in the talk, which is called Looking for Love. So you can find even more information about it there. I would like to know what a revert sister can do when she wants to get married, but she doesn't have a wali and she wants to speak with the brother. So the first thing is that you need to have a wali at the point that you do the marriage contract. Even if you can't arrange it at the time you want to speak to the brother, then I think at least having a representative, sort of someone with you in the conversation. Ideally, someone older, someone a bit more, someone who has a position of sort of trust. But even at worst case, having a friend or something, sit in on the conversation. Have the conversation by email before it goes to Skype and so on, and really take it seriously and put safeguards in place as much as you can. So I think it's really important that, often sometimes we'll be like, okay, I want to Skype. But really, is it the time to Skype? Is it not the time? You could maybe ask more questions by email until you're really sure that it's the right kind of thing. And then possibly you can Skype. And when you Skype, you should have somebody with you in the room with you, and somebody with them also, and make that clear to them that it's not a one-on-one private conversation. And also you can switch off your camera until you feel time to show your picture, and then, switch it back on again. That would be something that I would advise. But just having people around, having that wakil or that representative, I think that's really, really important. How do you seek knowledge that's authentic, especially when so many scholars have different views? That's a topic for another webinar, really. And I have some lectures on that topic. You can actually YouTube Muhammad Tim, How to Seek Knowledge. I have a recent one, which was done with an organization called JILC. So if you type in Muhammad Tim Knowledge, JILC, then inshallah there is a video on how to seek knowledge and how to seek authentic knowledge, inshallah ta'ala. And I think that's, it's a big topic. It would take me another hour at least. In fact, it took me longer than an hour. I think it took me about 2.5 hours to answer the question. So there's a proper lecture on that topic, inshallah. I do apologize that I'm answering the questions a little bit quickly, but again, I'm just trying to get through as many of the questions as possible. I have two younger sisters above 25 years old and in a relationship with the girls for the last 8 years, and she became Muslim 1 year before. But now her parents are forcing her to get married. What should I do now, because my financial condition is not good and I didn't tell my family about it? In all honesty, and I know this is going to seem, it's going to seem maybe a little, maybe not cold, but maybe a little bit difficult, a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow. But in all honesty, the first question I would ask is, do you really need to pursue marriage with that person? Is it not possible for them to marry, ultimately in the end somebody else, and for you to marry somebody else? The fact that you haven't started that relationship in a good way, and that you've got yourself in a situation which is not great, your parents don't know, is it worth dragging that person through all of that difficulty? Sometimes the answer might be yes, in which case you're going to have to find a way to make it work. But you're going to have to make a commitment to Allah that it's got to be halal, it's got to be right. It can't be done in the wrong way. But I think for a lot of people, they're pursuing something that doesn't need to be pursued. She's firm in her Islam. She, inshallah, will find someone better than you, and you, inshallah, will find someone better than her. Like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, said to Uthman and Hafsa, or about Uthman and Hafsa. He said, Hafsa will marry someone better than Uthman, and Uthman will marry someone better than Hafsa. That would always be my first choice. Because, you know, in a situation where there's a relationship been going on, she's become Muslim, your family don't know about it, then her family want to get her married off. Like sometimes you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? But if her family want to get her married to a non-Muslim, which is sometimes a situation, that her family want to get her married to a non-Muslim because they don't know that she's become a Muslim, then you have to do your best to protect her from that. But protecting her from that might not be getting married to her. Depends on the situation. One way or another, you have to show your commitment. If that's either telling your family, or that's either deciding that you're going to part ways, but you have to be clear about it. Stringing her along for year after year after year, that's not the right way to do things. And Allah knows best. Regarding getting people married and not being in a good financial situation, I think that is something that you ask Allah Azza wa Jal to make it easy for you. And I think it's permissible for Muslims to give from the zakah to help people to get married. But it's a cultural thing to need to spend money upon a woman to get married. In Islam, really, it should be the man who spends the money. But in many cultural situations, it's the case that they expect you to pay to get your sister married. Why would you need to pay to get your sister married? Your sister shouldn't need any money to get married. She should be able to get married without any funds at all, because at the end of the day, it should be the brother who should take that responsibility upon himself. That's one of the rights of the wife over the husband. Okay, question, what if you find a good character but their religion isn't strong? I don't advise that you go with this. The religion is the most important thing. And that's why for the man and the woman, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the religion before he mentioned anything and everything else. So I don't advise that good character is not enough. There has to be religious commitment first of all, as well as good character, inshallah. Someone from India, an only son to their parents, and they are against marrying a Muslim girl. If I'm made to choose between staying with my parents and marrying a Muslim, what should be my response? I think that's a very individual question. It's a very individual question. Because the reality of marriage is that it's not true that marriage is a sunnah. You know, marriage might be obligatory for some people. Some people need to get married. They cannot stay away from the haram unless they get married. Some people, marriage is less important for them. Some people, the parents need them more. Some people, it's not the case. But I think it's possible to get married and to look after your parents. I don't see why there needs to be a contradiction. If they're against it, I don't think that this is a valid, I don't think that this is a valid concern that you should listen to this concern that they don't want you to get married to a Muslim, because that's going to put you in harm's way and in difficulty. Rather, I think that you should look to marry at the right time. Maybe take some time to explain to them, and you can still take care of them, inshallah. And inshallah, that is the best of both worlds. Okay, I know as I'm answering these questions, more questions are coming back, so I'm going to have to at some point, I'm going to have to stop, but I'll go through them as quick as I possibly can. So a sister who lives in Germany, and a brother converted 1 year ago to Islam. They want to get married, but the problem is that her father is cultural, and he, he's not happy that he's not from the same ethnic background. And the dad is basically giving the issue of the fact that the brother is not from the same ethnic background. My advice, first of all, before you go above your dad, because you can go above your dad. At the end of the day, you can go to a balanced local sheikh or imam who can overrule your dad's decision. But before that, I think the best way is to show him your commitment. That's what I advise everybody, to show your commitment, in the sense that show him that you really want this marriage, that you're not going to accept his offer to go back to your home country and marry someone. Show him that you're really serious. Get his, maybe if you have some family members who will support you, like some balanced family members who will support you, and get them to also, to also look at the issue as well, to advise your dad, someone on your side. That could be an uncle or a brother, or, someone who can be a little bit on your side and fight your corner for you. But I think it's very, very important that you show how serious you are, even if you have to be patient for, a few months, but really show, because often when a person's father sees that they're really stubborn on something, they will eventually, realize that their position is wrong, that their position is wrong. What to do in a situation where someone keeps telling you that they're waiting for a sign from Allah before they decide whether to marry you. That's not right. Waiting for a sign from Allah, there is nothing in Islam about this. So I recommend that you send them the article that we posted about istikhara, and you suffice yourself with that, because it's a misconception that you wait for a sign from Allah. There is no sign from Allah. Instead, you ask Allah for what is good, and you put your trust in Allah, as Allah said, فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَوَكِّلِينَ. If you have made your decision, put your trust in Allah, and Allah loves to those who put their trust in Him. The question about new Muslim women, places for them to meet each other in London, I think that's best asked to the admin to Islamwise, and I'm sure they can research that for you. And if not, you can get in touch with me directly, and I can research for you depending on which area of London you're in and so on. Okay, so that's it's a very good question. It's quite a complex question, and I'll try to summarize it. So this is relating to a man who wants to marry a lady. She's converted for the last 18 months, but she has a lot of pressure from her family. I think it's really important that you alleviate that pressure. Finding a wali is not the problem. Finding a wali is not the problem, because at the end of the day, the wali is the Islamic person on the Islamic side, and the person who is in the position of a judge or similar, like the head of an Islamic center or so on. But what is really, really important is a couple of things. That you support her towards her family. Obviously, you can't have that much contact because you're not married yet, but you try to support her within your family. If she's happy to get married, try to get the contract done as quickly as possible, so that inshallah you can support her towards her family. Be gentle and considerate with her family. It's very, very difficult for them to understand, and it can, inshallah, it can be possible for them to, to understand and to appreciate it. But it's really important that you provide her with a second family, and you really look after her, take care of her, and that you get support from people who are experts in dealing with these situations. But I would suggest, if you both have decided to marry and your family is happy with that, that you go and you get a wali and you get the contract at least done, so that you can be a real support towards her. And again, I'm just very quickly answering. Does a revert sister need a guardian even if she's older and has been married before? Yes, a guardian you need in every circumstance. The Prophet ﷺ said, "La nikaha illa biwali." There is no marriage unless it has a guardian. That is, and the guardian, as we said, is the judge or the one in the position of a judge. And that means that, that could be if you have a Sharia court, or if you live in a country that has a Sharia court. If not, then you go to the nearest thing, which is the Islamic person that does the marriage in the area. It's the imam, or it's the head of the Islamic center, or something close to that. I mean, that's, as I can answer in the webinars, as good as I can answer. How do you establish compatibility before committing to marriage? I think, as we said in the webinar, a lot of asking questions. A lot of asking questions, and really, discussing the future and talking about what it is that you want from the future, and compatibility, things like that. I think that is one of the most important ways, and I think I've got more about it in the video lectures also, inshallah. Okay, so this is from someone whose father doesn't know that they are a Muslim yet. But he said that if you marry a Muslim, I will disown you. It's not required for you to listen to this, because what your parents are asking you to do is not allowed. It's not good. However, at the same time, you don't want to burn all of the bridges. Islamically, you can go and marry a Muslim and you don't need to listen to what your father said. However, you still don't want to burn the bridges. So I would introduce it to them softly and slowly. First of all, make sure that you're practicing Islam in yourself. Make sure you're somewhere safe where you can practice your religion properly. And then slowly introduce the issue to them. And at the end of the day, if you feel you need to get married for whatever reason, then that's what you need to do. At the end of the day, you can't listen to the father who says that I will never accept you to marry a Muslim. But I would also recommend that as much as you can, don't burn those bridges. And what I mean by that is not that you listen, but that the way that you disobey your parents. Like Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَإِن جَاهَدَاكَ عَلَىٰ أَن تُشْرِكَ بِمَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. And if they compel you to worship something besides me, something which you don't have any knowledge about, do not obey them, but accompany them in this world in the best way. And that means that when you have to disobey your parents, you disobey them in a really respectful and gentle way, and not in a like, I'm not going to listen to you, I don't care, I'm going to do what I want. It's more like, look, this is what I need to do, and this is who I am. With regard to concealing your Islam, you don't need to tell anybody you're a Muslim until you're comfortable with it. And many of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they also used to conceal their Islam until they were confident, until they were able to to tell them. And I think each one is, I know for me, when I told my parents that I became Muslim, it was easier than when I told my mom that I was going to get married. When I told my mom that I was going to get married, she was upset. She was upset. When I told her I became Muslim, she was okay. I mean, she was upset, but she was like 50% upset. When I told her that I was going to get married, she was really upset. This was before she knew who I was going to get married to or anything like that. It was just her first reaction. So it does take, it takes a little time and a little bit of wisdom. Conditions of talking before marriage, the most important one is that there should not be any chatting alone, where you and the potential spouse are speaking privately to one another. Should be with the guardian involved. I recommend email and just CC the guardian, or chat as a group or something, and it should only be to the extent necessary. That means it's not like just every day, like, hey, how are you doing? You okay? I miss you. It's more like, like when it's necessary. And then there shouldn't be any fear of, something haram happening. Is it better to suggest to people considering Islam to get married before becoming Muslim to someone of good character? That's a good question. I mean, I think that Islam is not something that, I think that if someone is considering Islam, that's the most important thing. And I don't think it matters whether they're married before, they're not married before. It can be a complication if a lady's married to a non-Muslim husband and then has to leave that non-Muslim husband when she becomes Muslim. That can be difficult. But at the end of the day, I think if a person, we just need to focus on a person, wanting Islam and a person, educating a person about what they need from Islam and giving them the right information. And whatever their marital situation is, inshallah, we'll deal with it as best we possibly can. Okay, very good question. Very, very good question. Those of us who are reverts, for the most part, only our non-Muslim fathers or brothers know as well. Can they represent us? Yes, of course they can, but they can't be the wali. So let's just say, for example, your non-Muslim father is really helpful and really considerate. He can be totally involved in the marriage process. He can represent you. He can go and meet the guy. He can give his approval, but ultimately he can't be the one that gives you away, because it's not allowed for a non-Muslim to be in a state of authority over a Muslim where they can control what's going to happen with their life and they can reject a marriage or whatever. But if they want to help, by all means, you can get them involved. There's nothing wrong with having them involved as like a representative or a help in some way. But bear in mind that their measure of advice may not be, Islamically valid. So you kind of have to think about that too. A Muslim brother who's appointed as a representative for us, does he need to know you? I don't know. I don't think I think he needs to know a bit about you. But I think that when I act as a representative for somebody, what I tend to do is I literally act as though I work for that person. Like they tell me what to do. I come and they say, go meet this brother. And I'll say, look, what my thoughts about the brother are this and this. And then the sister says, well, I'm not really interested in that part because that's not how I am or whatever. And over time, you kind of get to know what they like and what they don't. But I think that both are possible, issues. But I think with the representative, there's more freedom because, you don't have that. It's not like they have to be the wali. You can pick whoever you think is the best sort of person. For me, it's often just that they want me to give advice about whether this person is the right kind of person to get married to. And I just go meet the brother, have a coffee with him or something, and I just talk to him and, then I'll feed back and say, look, I think he's a good guy because of this, this, and this. I may not know everything about the sister, but I might still be able to judge whether I think that guy is the right kind of person, whether he's marriage material or not, things like that. As a revert, can you have your nikah with just a few witnesses without announcing it to non-Muslim family members? Wow, it's a really good question. I'm really impressed with these questions. I'm going to try to get to the end of these 12 questions, inshallah. The scholars differed over announcing a marriage, whether the marriage has to be announced or not. I think that a marriage should always be announced unless there is a very clear reason not to do so. And for a revert, there may be a clear reason not to do so. So what I would suggest, if that situation comes about, I would suggest that you seek advice from a scholar on that specific issue, that this is who I am and this is why I want to keep it secret. And it may be that it's perfectly valid for you to keep it secret because you are, a revert and that's the situation that you're in. If a revert is looking for marriage and had children already, what would be the appropriate way to introduce children before the marriage, and should the children be happy? Yeah, I think it is important to introduce the children before marriage. And I think that probably it's not the first thing you might do. It's more something that you might do, when you feel this is probably going to be the right person and you're both basically happy. You've asked your questions about compatibility. So say that I would like to, introduce my children. I'd like to bring them along. And to even, the way that you talk to your children and introduce the fact that you're going to get married again is really important too. So I do think that it's something good. I think it's something that should be done, but I just think maybe it's something that might not be done on the first day that you meet your potential spouse, but something that you might see over time. And you might, for example, if, as long as you're not together in private somewhere, but you might, for example, meet in a park or something like that, where you can see the sort of person interact with the children, what kind of a person they are, and how they kind of, or whatever, or if you could go take the children for some food or something, but something in the way you really can see sort of the way that they interact with them. I think that's pretty important. I think I've kind of covered that one already, or very similar to it. Okay, how do you find out a sister's knowledge and piety? How do you find out about a sister's knowledge, and how do you find out about a sister's piety? Well, that's a very good question. It's like I said about asking about religion in the beginning. Tell me about the Islamic activities you do. Tell me the kind of books you read. Whose lectures do you watch? What kind of Islamic studies have you done? These kind of questions, like we said, they can help to introduce the topic. Obviously, you could ask how much Quran they've memorized and a lot of other things, inshallah, that can give you that information about someone's knowledge. And, in terms of piety piety is something only Allah can really judge. But you ask, for example, the questions that matter to you. How the sister covers, how she spends her day, what her perspective is on certain things, and that sort of thing. Can you briefly explain the role of the wali during the marriage and in the case of divorce? Okay, I will certainly try my very, very best. So the role of the wali during the marriage, and I guess that means after the person gets married. There isn't necessarily a role for the wali after the person gets married, and there isn't necessarily a role for the wali and in the case of divorce. It doesn't have to be the same person. Some people, their wali supports them all the way through the marriage, and that's an amazing thing. But if you don't have it, you still have advisors, and you still have friends, and you still have people you can reach out to, marriage counselors and other people. So it's not necessary that it should be the wali to be that specific person. Okay. As an aspiring student of knowledge and possibly going to study abroad, sometimes getting married will be difficult due not to be able to give the wife her rights. What would you advise such a person who can find a wife that can put up with those hardships that might come with marrying a student? And marrying a student is difficult. Wallahi, marrying a student, marrying an Islamic speaker, marrying anyone in the field of da'wah is difficult. Wallahi, it's difficult. Because they have a lot of commitments and sometimes they're going to struggle, But I feel that it's really important that you discuss this while looking to get married. This is what I'm looking to do. I'm looking for someone, in your biography, I'm looking for someone who is, or your CV, I'm looking for someone who is like this, who's going to be like this and act like this, and who's going to be a bit understanding. And inshallah, you find somebody who has that compatibility and who wants to have that patience. As long as you're upfront with them, then I think that's really, really important. I also think it's not necessary that you should not give the wife her rights because you're studying. I think it's quite possible to do both, inshallah. If a sister doesn't have family support and divorce could end in homelessness, can she ask for a higher mahar to act as a safety net for her to fall back on? That's a really good question. So this is a situation of a sister who's scared that if a marriage ended in divorce, her divorce might lead her to have nothing at all. Can she ask for a higher mahar? Like the mahar is the dowry. You don't really call it a dowry because a dowry is what a woman pays a man, but a dowry that she receives when she gets married. I think it's reasonable. As long as it's not extortionately high, I think it's a reasonable thing to ask for. But it shouldn't be extortionately high because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَإِن تَفَرَّقَا يُغْنِ اللَّهُ كُلًّا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that if they break apart, then Allah Azza wa Jal will enrich each one from His bounty. So I think it's a sensible thing to ask for, but I don't think it should be extortionately high that it makes a difficulty for the brother because that puts problems in a marriage. If you don't feel totally happy with a potential spouse, should you still marry them and how much should you compromise? It's a very good question. I've discussed it quite a bit in the video lecture, I think, on Looking for Love. I think that it's a difficult one, how much to compromise. But I think that the question is really a question of in which areas. Because, sometimes people have an unrealistic expectation when they come into looking for marriage. So that's something to bear in mind. And also, I wouldn't compromise in religion, for example. But I might compromise on an aspect of religion if the person has a clear dedication to change. Now, I'm not talking about a big aspect, but a minor thing. Like, someone has something that I don't approve of religiously, but, they really want to change and they've already made an effort. You have to be sort of sensible about it. I think I spoke more about it in the lecture because it's quite a long topic. But I think that you have to be very wise about it. You don't want to compromise on the fundamentals, but you also don't want to set the bar too high. I think that's a similar question. Should you marry someone you're not attracted to? I don't think you should marry someone you're not attracted to, but I think that at the end of the day, you also shouldn't have such a high bar that, you're basically waiting for, somebody who is like the people of Jannah. like the people of paradise. I think you've got to be sensible about what you're looking for, but I think that there has to be some degree of attraction there. Otherwise, marriage can get into difficulties. How can I inspire my spouse who has converted to study the Quran? That's a very good question. That's a beautiful question. I think slowly, don't overburden them, because it can feel very burdensome. You know, someone's like 600 pages and you've got to read and all these strange letters that we don't understand. Let, you know, like a nice, gentle introduction. I'm working on an online program maybe to do some of that stuff. But, you know, some great online programs already. There's things like New Muslim Academy and things like that. Just make it gentle, because often the reason that they don't want to study is not because they don't like studying the Quran, but because they just feel intimidated by other Muslims, maybe the environment, maybe, you know, being around people who all know the Quran and they don't, or just feeling like it's difficult. Just be very, very, very gentle and study with them as well. What's the right way of performing nikah in the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam without any involvement of culture? That's a very good question. It's maybe a bit long for what the time that we have left. And I have probably done it in the video that talks about looking for love. But generally, the nikah needs to have a wali and the two spouses, and it needs to have two witnesses, and ideally it should be announced. So the nikah should be quite simple. It shouldn't be necessarily, you know, it doesn't have a particular celebration associated with it. There's a celebration after you get married called a walima. But I think that if you go through, for example, Muhammad al-Jibari's book, Sheikh Muhammad al-Jibari, I think inshallah ta'ala that will, you know, that will really, really help inshallah talk about the right way of performing the nikah. But basically what happens is the wali will say to the husband that I offer you this lady in marriage, and he will mention her name. And the husband will say, I accept this lady in marriage, and the witnesses will witness it. And then inshallah it should be announced. And of course that would be preceded by a short sermon and a reminder, which could be given by like a master of ceremonies or like an officiator, or it could just be given by the father of the bride or the wali of the bride. It could be done by either. And then once they have, you know, stayed together and they're happy with each other, there should be a celebration which is called a walima. You can get a lot more information in the books that we link to, and they're in the chat, inshallah. What about a sister that would like to live? Okay, 1 second. It's late. I think it's after midnight here in Dubai. So I'm getting my words mixed up. What about a sister that would like to wear niqab but lives in a non-Muslim area and it would cause problems with family? Well, see, the scholars differ over whether the niqab is obligatory or not. My personal opinion is that it is obligatory. I feel that is the stronger opinion. But at the same time, I have a lot of respect for the people who hold a different opinion to that. I think that they're not holding it out of desire. They have a real, reason for believing that. But at the same time, I just want, we just want to be clear that if you believe you have to wear it, then, you have to wear it. You have to find a way to do that. But if you believe that you don't need to wear it, or you believe that it's not obligatory, then in that case, the situation is a little bit, maybe in that case, you can take into account the area that you live in and the issues with the family. I think one of the things that I personally would say is that if you do wear it, like maybe, when it comes to, your close family members, you can always sort of remove it when you, go to their house or something like that. Maybe that's a way around it. It's a long question, maybe a bit difficult to sort of go into the details about. But I think if you believe that it's obligatory, then you have to find a way to make it happen. Because if you believe something's obligatory, then you don't have a choice. If you really genuinely don't believe that's the case, then in this case, it's something that maybe you can think about staging it later on when the situation improves and you move to a better area. But a lot of the time, people have, the shaitan, the devil often whispers to people, and makes you think and makes you feel like the situation is worse than it will be. And sometimes when you do it, and I would always look at the women who do, who wear it in the same area, and you might find that they found a way to do it. They found a way to make it work for them. And that happens not just with issues of women. I mean, it happens with issues of jobs. People say to me, I can't pray in my job. And I say to them, do any of your colleagues pray? Or do you know anyone in the same job who prays? And often it's the case they do. And I'm like, okay, so how does that person pray? You got to find out what they're doing and try and implement it for yourself, inshallah ta'ala. I know it's a very brief answer to it's a very, very difficult question, but the time is very limited. What would you advise a born Muslim who wants to marry a revert? That's a very good question. Actually, I had that in my lecture, but I actually didn't answer it. I didn't go through it. I don't know why. I maybe ticked it off and I hadn't gone through it. But I was going to talk about that. I think there's a couple of things. Number one, know what you're getting yourself in for. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Don't worry about it. I'm not saying anything bad about reverts. But know, like, go into it with your eyes open. At the end of the day, you're going to be marrying someone who is a little bit new to Islam, somebody who's probably still finding their feet, who might not know all of the things that you know, who needs gentle encouragement, who might have family issues and other problems. So have your eyes open. That's the first thing. And the second thing is be patient and gentle. The Prophet ﷺ said gentleness was never put into anything except that it made it beautiful. And it was never taken out of anything except that it made it ugly. And also patience and, just generally really, finding the right person, not just any revert, but finding the person that matches what you want. And how can you see the real character of a person? This is the last question we're going to answer tonight, inshallah ta'ala. How can you see the real character of a person? I think that ultimately you have to trust in Allah for some of that. But I think that asking intelligent questions, more than one meeting, having friends who know them, finding out, saying, can I speak to someone who, or who, sort of maybe not speak to someone, but, like trying to find out people that know them in their normal life. And also, like getting different people, like getting a representative to go meet them, for example. See, when you get a representative to go meet them, he might see a different side to them that maybe, hasn't been seen before. I know that one last question has come up and I want to continue. And I'm just going to give it a brief answer because I'm just about to finish the webinar. So I don't want to I can't keep going forever and ever and ever. But I try my best to answer whatever I can. Someone who's been married for 17 years with 2 young daughters. The wife is a revert, not really practicing Islam. She doesn't mind people practicing Islam, but she won't commit herself. And asking whether that person should leave his wife. I think that's it. It's a very specific question about a circumstance that you really probably need to know more about. I would probably need to know more about it and speak more sort of privately about it and know more about it, to be honest with you. However, I would say that the first reaction shouldn't be to leave her. Like as in, day one, she's not doing it, I'm going to leave. But it's more about finding why she's not doing those things and finding out how you can, is there a potential for change? She's not practicing Islam. We're trying to get to the bottom of it and find out why. Is it because she never really got attached to Islam in the first place? Is it because she, just sort of, Islam was just a token gesture to get married? Is it because she finds that Muslims haven't treated her well? She doesn't have a good impression of Islam? Or whatever it is it because she just hasn't learned anything about Islam? Like we said, continuous learning, put it into practice, good friends, and so on. So there's a lot that you can do before you make that decision that it's the right time to leave. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. I just want to conclude now just by saying Jazakumullahu khairan to all of you. It took a lot longer than I thought it would. We've been going now for almost 2.5 hours. So it's been a fantastic webinar. I've really, really appreciated you guys giving your time. I haven't had a chance to look through the chat window. I am hoping that the brothers who are with Islamwise have been looking through there. Please do bear in mind that they have got that offer or support for you for that website. I said personally, it's not like I can, I don't personally endorse things that I don't know about, but mashallah, the brothers, they think it's a good website. So it's it's something to look into. And I hope, inshallah ta'ala, that you got answers to some of your questions today. And this is what Allah Azza wa Jalla has made easy for me to do. And Allah knows best. Wassalatu wassalam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We send peace and blessings upon the Messenger Muhammad and upon his family and his companions. Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. We conclude with a very famous statement that the Prophet ﷺ used to make when he would conclude a speech. he would say that, "Oh Allah, you're exalted and flawless, and all praise is due to you for your praiseworthy, perfect attributes and characteristics. There is no God worthy of worship except you. I seek your forgiveness and I turn to you in repentance. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh."
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for everybody who viewed the webinar. This is your brother Kaleem from the admin team. Firstly, I want to say Jazakallah khair to Muhammad Tim, our instructor for today. As the Prophet ﷺ said, he has not thanked Allah who has not thanked the people. So I'd like to thank Muhammad Tim for spending over 3 hours, and it's past midnight where he is. Jazakumullah khair. And also regarding any questions that you guys have that haven't been answered, or if there's any other follow-up, you can email us, inshallah, info@islamwise.org. The video, yes, it will be edited and then it will be available for you guys to watch again later. Regarding the offer, I did want to spend a bit more time on it to present it, but time is short and you guys have been here for a long time, alhamdulillah. But basically, we have partnered with a matrimony website, which we recommend, alhamdulillah, which is a website which is for practicing people. I myself have used that website many years ago when I got married, alhamdulillah, which is why we are recommending it. We have partnered with them and we are offering a 50% off for revert Muslims, alhamdulillah. So I'm going to put the promo code on this chat here now, inshallah. This promo code is valid for a limited time only, and it's for revert stroke new Muslims, inshallah. So I'm going to put all the details on there. You can check out the website and you can see more about them. You can see why we're recommending them. And then inshallah, if you can subscribe to find a space, inshallah, with a 50% off. For those who can't afford, even though, with 50% off, it's very cheap. So if you subscribe for a whole year with the discount code we're offering, it's only £30. Alhamdulillah, it's only £30 for the whole year, and you can be on that website searching for a spouse. For those who can't afford it, we are here for you guys. So please email us if that's something which you can't afford. So now put the details on here, inshallah. So there you go. There's a website. It's called purematrimony.com. Have a check out the website. You can see a short video of what they're all about and what makes them different from others. And then, if you can sign up for free. And then to get the paid subscription, you can sign up and enter the promo code, inshallah. The name of the website is Pure Matrimony. I have just put the link up. I've just put the link up there, inshallah. So yeah, you guys can visit that, inshallah, and have a look. Any feedback, please. We appreciate your feedback. So you can email us, or you can reach out to us on social media, or you can WhatsApp us. Our number is on the website. Apologies, you guys asking for the link. Sorry, I shared it just to the sheikh. Just a moment, so you can all see. Okay, there we go. So that's our email address. For any follow-up questions, anything you guys want answering, we're here for you guys. And then that's the website for the matrimony website that we partnered with to offer a 50% discount code, which is valid for a limited time only, inshallah. So jazakallah khair for everybody for watching. Hope to see you guys soon for the next webinar, inshallah, which we'll be putting together and we'll be posting out on our social media and website, inshallah. Barakallahu feek. Jazakumullah khair. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.